messing around, a check mark. Realizing, of course, that every check mark means you've given yourself a job, right? Every check mark, the second check mark means you've got to do something else. I've never really known music teachers looking around for extra work. I just haven't met that person. We are the hardest working people you'll ever meet, we don't need that. This program is absolutely simple so far as managing it. On the handout, on the front page, by the way, I do have a cold, I will be coughing, I apologize, I'll only apologize this one time. From now on you'll know that I would apologize, but it takes too long. And I'd be wasting my time, like I am right now. Gin in the morning is just great. There's the program. Those two boxes, I said it was simple. There's the rules box and there's the consequence box. Now on the day that you would introduce this program, that circle below the boxes and the two arrows would not be there. Also, very importantly, there would be no rules written in the box. You'll understand that it's just the two boxes, but they must be visible all year. Tag board on the bulletin board in the front of the room there. How many rules should you have? I can't tell you that. I can only recommend as few as possible. Most people who write and talk about this will recommend the fewest possible. And it makes perfect sense. I mean, you can't have a kid in your class thinking, you know, I think I just broke a rule. Oh, yeah, Rule 26, paragraph 7, lines 13 to 14. I mean, it can't be like an insurance policy that nobody can understand. It's got to be the fewest possible. I recommend 4 to 5. Most writers that I found say around 5. Some say more, and I like many of them. But I really do think, if you think hard about your rules, you can compress them into 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 really powerful rules that cover a lot of things. They have to be your rules. I can't tell you what your rules should be. I don't know you. I don't know your community, your principal, your superintendent, or anything. They have to be your rules. I'm going to give, especially university students, and some of the rest of you, some of you who have been in the classroom a long time and are wondering, do I have the right rules? I'll give you a little homework, something you might want to try. Find a time when it's really quiet in the house. The wife is out bowling or something, and it's really quiet, and get a legal pad. And you are your community's best journalist. You are a phenomenal newspaper journalist, and your editor has just tasked you with going out and visiting a school and visiting a music class and writing an article on it. Now this is a journalistic endeavor, so it has to be facts, no opinions. You need to say exactly where the teacher was when the first kid walked in, where the teacher was when the last kid left, etc. Everything that happened. Now here's the interesting thing. The school you are visiting is yours, and you are the teacher. Write a journalistic account of the class that you would think you had died and gone to heaven if you could teach it. Just exactly what you want, the perfect class. After you write it and read it over, embedded within that article will be your rules. If you want your students to get quiet instantly on a certain signal, they have to know that. They're not mind readers. You would find your rules in that article where you have written down exactly the most perfect class you could ever imagine yourself teaching. And then those become your rules. Now, in the beginning, you might have 25 rules. As you work at it, you can compress them. I will be sharing with you my 2 most important rules. And I think they are universally acceptable. If you would adopt them, I would be flattered. I think they would work really, really well for you. I do know this. Students must know the reasons for all rules. We are adults, and kids just think, oh, he's just being an adult. He just tell me what to do. If kids know the reasons for our rules, they will buy into them, if you can explain them. If you have a rule in your classroom, those who are now teachers, and you can't level with your students and tell them why that's a rule, then it probably shouldn't be a rule. They will buy into the rule if they know the reason. And every reason, I believe, for a rule should be tied to music. These are music classroom rules. These aren't all school rules. Not all school rules are something else, and your students need to know I will follow those rules. I could lose my job if you decided that the only way to end an argument is with your fists. That is out of my, you're out of here. You go to the principal or whatever. These are just the way we run our musical society that we're building here in this room with these doors closed. My first rule that I want to share with you, I'm sure it's in your handout, is no talking when the teacher is working. That is so unbelievably important. And it is very, very, very doable. I hope to be able to show you that. Notice it says when the teacher is working. It doesn't say when Mrs. Brown is working or Mr. Newell is working. When the teacher is working. And then I would always make sure my students knew that that includes substitute teachers. And then I told my students, substitute teaching is the worst job perhaps in the world. And some of you are substitute teachers, I can tell. So I'm so fortunate I never had to be a substitute teacher. It's just a horrible job because I know when I was in school, I was a real brat when there was a sub. I mean, I'm ashamed of it now, but I didn't know any better. I was young and stupid. Now I'm old and slightly less stupid, but it's a terrible job. And I would tell my students, you don't ever, ever want a substitute teacher to leave me your name as somebody who didn't cooperate with them. I didn't tell them what would happen to them, and I did that on purpose because I knew that what they were thinking would be probably a lot more harsh than I would ever do. I just made sure. And I can tell you, I never did get a nasty note from a substitute teacher. Most of them basically said, I would substitute for you any day. Sorry. I said I was going to say that, didn't I? Well, students need to know the reason for no talking. Kids, all we have together this year is time. That's all. We have time together. We have minutes together. And we are going on a mystery journey. I am your leader, but I must tell you something. I have no idea where we're going to end up. We could end up being an okay band, a good band, an excellent band. We could end up being the best band that has ever gone through this school. I don't know, but I guarantee you I'm going to work as hard as I can to get us as far on our journey as possible. And therefore, we cannot waste a single minute. You know, if we waste only 5 minutes a day, you think, well, that's nothing, 5 minutes. And then, of course, I did the math. We met 5 days a week, 5 times 180 days. I would say that's the equivalent of 6 more weeks of rehearsals. And I did the math because I knew some middle school kid was going to check me out. I'm so sorry. Oh, don't say that. I'm sorry. Can't help it. You know, the ancient Greek elocutionists used to practice speaking with marbles in their mouths. These are my marbles. They're called menthol eucalyptus halls. So I hope I can still talk with this thing in my mouth. Let's see, where was I? Okay. I know this too. I'm sure that our students should hear only one rule a day. You're a new 6th grader to my school. You have 7 teachers. Each teacher has 7 rules. Every teacher reads or points to their 7 rules. This kid on his first day of school in a brand new school has heard 49 rules. You talk about overkill. They're not going to remember which, is this the classroom I'm supposed to do? 1 rule a day. I had to get permission from my principal to not have my rules all posted. But principals, some of them, will listen to you. If you can make it, you can explain it just like I'm explaining to you. You know, that's too much for the kid. I want 1 rule a day. I promise you my kids will be well behaved. You won't see them coming to your office. And my principal did allow me to do that. He just said, don't tell the other teachers. I can understand that. Critically important. And it always amazes me that music teachers don't know this. All rules have to be practiced. Anybody in this room want to tell me that your ensemble learned to play the F-sharp melodic minor scale in one day? No, I don't think. Well, if you tell me that, I'm going to believe you. No, we introduced the F-sharp melodic minor scale one day. And then what do? We practice it every day until it becomes part of the ensemble's repertoire of scales. Behaviors are the same thing. Behaviors have to be practiced until they become part of the repertoire of behaviors of the class. We must practice the rules. We must let the kids concentrate on one rule at a time and practice it. Basically, our goal is to have our classroom rules become our classroom habits. Habits require no thinking. To the students, the rules must be, that's just the way we do things in here. So how about I introduce rule number one? Okay, you're my 6th grade band. I don't know any of you. You know me, just my name. It's the first day of school. You're all sitting there probably kind of scared. And I get your attention, which isn't hard because it's like you were when I first walked in here this morning. You're all quiet. No, what's this guy like? And I then say, you see the rules box? We're going to do one rule today. At the end of the day, I'll write it in there so you can see it tomorrow and remember it, or the next time. I didn't see my 6th graders every day. And then I would say, here's the way it is. I will walk up, and at 9:06 every morning, and I point to the clock, at 9:06 I will step on the podium. Not 9:05, not 9:07. 9:06 I will step on the podium, and you will get instantly quiet. If you're talking, you will stop in mid-sentence. When you get really good, you'll stop in the middle of the word. It will be instantly quiet. And then the class will start at 9:06. And then I said, this is the first day, and I said, now let's practice that. I'm going to step off the podium. You need to talk. You must talk. If you don't know the person beside you, introduce yourself. If you do know them from your neighborhood, tell them you like their new shirt or whatever. You must talk. And then I would step off the podium. Now when I stepped off the podium, some kids would start talking, but real softly. I mean, I don't think they're accustomed to hearing a teacher say, you must talk, right? And so I would just do a charades kind of thing. I would say, I can't hear you. Well, trust me, in middle school, they will ramp that up in a real hurry. And then I would do what I do every morning. I would start talking to kids, you know. I would say, I bet you're Andrew's sister. You look, you know, I would just be friendly. We have to build friendships with our students and respect. Students to teachers, teachers to students. I'm starting that process on day one, building friendships, but I'm in charge. And so now everybody knows what's going on, so I would then walk to the podium and do kind of a grandiose step on the podium, and it would be instantly quiet. Because everybody knows the game, right? They all understand. And that would be it. I would just go on. I would not thank them for getting quiet. I am having them practice what it's going to be like every day in this class for the next 180 days. I certainly am not going to thank them every day for getting quiet when I step on the podium. So no thanks. I made it as real as possible, this practice. So the, excuse me, it's now a real day too. Kids are talking now. They're not as afraid, etc. And they've met some kids. I'm talking to them, practicing names. It's very important to learn our students' names as quickly as possible. Hey, you is not a very nice name. It's kind of insulting. But I step up on the podium, and is it instantly quiet? No. Some kids have forgotten. I think the best remedy for that situation is, like I said, charades. I would just look down at the podium. I'd look confused. I'd look down at the podium, like I'm saying, yeah, I'm on the podium. Then I'd go like this, step off the podium, and then I would go, now why am I doing all this without talking? Because they're remembering. If I talked, it could sound like nagging. It could be like I'm just thinking, you kids are really stupid, I just told you this yesterday. I think it's far better. So they, oh yeah, this is the class where we're, oh yeah. And then I would walk and talk to students, then I would come and step on the podium, and it would be instantly quiet. I would practice that every day for as long as it took. I met my students in 7th grade. I met them 5 days a week, which was wonderful. So I've devoted the first 2 weeks of school to what I call preseason, and I relate it to sports teams. Kids are always love sports. This is the preseason. This is where we learn our drills, we learn our routines, but the official game doesn't start until the season starts. And this is preseason. So if kids forgot something during that first 2 weeks, I did not come down on them with anything. I used it as a teachable moment and say, now in the real season, that would be a penalty. And we'll be talking about the consequences soon, kids. Above all, our students demand that we be fair. I think it is the #1 concern of students for us to be fair. If you are perceived as being unfair, you will not ever be respected. They must feel that you are fair. You do not have favorites in your classroom. You do not treat the principal flute player any better than the worst percussionist. You treat everybody the same. Fairness is extremely important. Rule number 2 was introduced the second day, and this is what I'm sharing with you. I think it's really, really a good rule. You will stop playing instantly when a rehearsal cutoff, and that looks like this. Very grandiose so everybody can see it. You will stop playing instantly. Why? Time. All right? I have something to say, and I know it's going to help us. You all want to be in the best band possible. Nobody wants to be on a football team that loses every game. Nobody wants to be in a band that sounds horrible. You want what I want, and the only way to get that is this way, using every possible minute. I then made the first of many promises I made to my students. I think teachers should promise students many things and obviously never ever break a promise. And so I said, you will stop instantly, and I promise you, I will say what I have to say in the fewest words possible, and you'll be playing again. And that's why you've signed up for this class, to play, not to listen to me talk. I promise I will say what I have to say in the fewest words possible, and then you'll be playing again. First rehearsals, which happened in my situation on the second day of school. Kids didn't bring their instruments to school the first day, but the second day they did. That was their assignment on the first day. Find your instrument. See if you can figure out where you left it on the last day of school last summer. Throw away the green reed. So they had their instruments the second day. But there were no music stands. There was no music. That was on purpose. They got their instruments. And what's the first thing I had the 6th grade band play? Concert B-flat major scale. Is there any other scale in the band? It's a great scale if you want students concentrating on something else. It would be silly to have them play the F-sharp major scale, and I want them to be concentrating on what I'm doing. And so it's the B-flat concert major scale, 4 counts each note, please. Here we go. Give me a nice breath. Duh. Everybody stop. There's nothing to look at but me. I would say, better attack. Again. Duh, duh. Let's make it legato, more connected. What I am doing, this first rehearsal is absolutely staged. That first attack could have been wonderful, but can you tell me that an attack can't be a little better? I don't know, it's all subjective. So I stopped them instantly, and they stopped playing instantly. And then I said 2 words, better attack. What I am doing with this first several rehearsals is I am making the rules come alive. These are not just dead words printed on a piece of tagboard. This is the way we do this class. This is terribly important. The first 2 weeks of school, as I said, my only lesson plan was to make the classroom rules the classroom habits, the way we do things in here. Music was very far off my mind. We played music. I picked stuff that was good, that would sound easy, would be easy. You know, if you get your classroom totally under management, in the first 2 weeks, you've got 34, 35 weeks of wonderful music making ahead of you. It's worth the time. Your only goal, I believe, for the first chunk of school should be to get the management. Management is job number one. That management has to be in place before the music can happen. And so that's what I'm doing. I am making the words I have spoken so far come alive. And the kids are saying, ooh, he really means what he says. And so those first rehearsals are absolutely staged. Every rule after that, I made sure we practiced that rule. You have to practice. This is music. You have to practice not only music, but behaviors. Let's talk about the consequences. I would start talking about the consequences probably about the third day. I don't remember. I retired in 1993. Some of you weren't even born then, I'm sure. So it's been a long time. So I don't know what day. But obviously the students are wondering about the consequences. I believe there should be far fewer consequences than rules. Most people have a hierarchy of consequences. To me, that's more record keeping. I don't like records. You know, I'm just lazy. I had one, and I didn't plan this, but I really think it was great. My one consequence was probably the most used in all of history, and that is detention. Now, I realize this will not work for some of you. You might teach in a school where detentions aren't used, although I don't know how those classrooms work. I mean, a country without laws is a country where there's mayhem. I mean, there have to be some kind of consequences for breaking the law, right? Anyway, those of you who do have schools where you can do detentions, I realize my detention was after school, but you might be, many of us teach from the trunks of our cars, right? That's where everything is, because we start at one school, then we go to another school, and we end up in a different school. So how can you do a detention of a kid after school when it was your morning school? So you'll have to deal with these. And if detention doesn't work, that's fine. It's the principle I want you to understand. So I'm going to talk about detentions. You get together with your administration if detention wouldn't work for you and tell them, I want to handle all my own discipline. Help me out here. What can I do? So here are the principles of the detention. By the way, having only one, I think, sent a very important psychological message to my students. The message was, I didn't know this when I did it. I now know it because I had time to think after I retired. The message was, every rule in this class is equally important. There's no small little petty theft. I mean, every rule is equally important. So you get the same consequence for anything you do in here, meaning they're all equal. They're all equal. And I think that's a good psychological message for kids to get. Detentions were described in painstaking detail. Your detentions are in this room, right here in the band room. Now, I know you've heard about the all-school detention room, but that's for all school rules. I want you doing your time where you did the crime, right here. And I want you to be thinking about why you're here. You will sit in a chair that will be facing a cinder block wall. You won't look left, you won't look right. You'll just look at that cinder block wall. I will be coming in and out of the room probably, and I'll be helping some students. You will not look at me. You will not look left or right. You will not write a note to your girlfriend. You will not do your math homework. You're not in here for me to do you a favor so you get your math homework done. You, now who are teaching, you would have to say you will not listen to your iPod. You will not text. You will not check your phone. You will stare at that wall for 30 minutes. Not 29, not 31, I promise you, 30 minutes. About halfway through, I'm still talking to my student. About halfway through, you're going to look at the clock, and I always put the chair right under the clock. I wanted them to see how long this took. You'll be thinking, oh man, this is so stupid, so boring. I could be home playing touch football with the kids, eating Oreos and drinking milk, or watching TV, or playing with my thumbs. My kids didn't know how to do that, but yours would certainly be able to play video games. And here I sit staring at this stupid wall. Mr. Newell told me I could try to count the dots in the cinder block, but it's impossible. And he told us that only he knows how many are there. But I did try to inject humor in whenever I could, on even a serious subject. And you're going to be thinking, I got another 15 minutes. This is so boring. I don't want to do this again. That's the key. A consequence must be utterly boring. There's nothing that an adolescent hates worse than being bored. Walk beside some grumpy adolescent on a Saturday morning and say, what's wrong? They won't say that it's raining out and I was going to play tennis. They'll just say, there's nothing to do. I'm bored. You know? They hate it. Great. Use it. Use it. Bore them to death. Do not have students help you after school for a detention. Students like to help the teacher. I mean, I'm a band director. I probably tightened more music stands than any of you. And it would be nice to have help. And I had students who would say, Mr. Newell, you need any help? Great, but not in detention. They end up liking it. That's not the object of a detention. That's not the object of consequence. We want them to be saying to themselves, I don't want to do this again. This is really, really boring. You can get several detentions in the same class. All right? I mean, you could get 2 in a class, 3, if you keep it up. Each one is a separate 30 minutes on a separate day after school. Another promise, and this one is very, very, very important. I told my students, I promise you, I will never ever guess that you deserve a detention. Let's say I'm rehearsing a band and somebody over there is talking and it's really irritating me. I stop the band, I look over, and there sits Christopher. And I like Christopher, but Christopher does a lot of talking. And so I say, Christopher, you've got a detention. Christopher immediately says, I wasn't talking. And I can tell just by the way he says it, he's being honest. And then all the kids near him say, Christopher wasn't talking. And I'm still talking to my students. I'd say, none of you would ever trust me again, and I wouldn't blame you. So I promise you, I will never guess that you deserve a consequence. If it was for talking, I could tell you exactly what you said because I've gotten pretty good at reading lips. So be very careful what you say in here. I think that's very, very important. I promise you I will never guess. And I will tell you folks, I never had a student argue with me about a detention. They all knew it, they agreed to it, they understood the rules, they understood it was wasting time, and I would go up to them after class privately and say, and before I could say it, they would say, I know, I was talking, or whatever. I just never had it. I would tell my students, when your detention is done, I will come in at 30 minutes, I will excuse you, I will say, have a great evening, and you will say the same to me, and we'll forget about it. You know, what, it's over. How can you evaluate this program? In September, October, you will have maybe a fair number of consequences, detentions in my case. November, very few. December, none. And for the rest of the year, a detention will be an absolute occurrence. It'll be surprising because the students really do learn. He means what he says. They are boring. What if you decide to skip detention? I told you it was painstaking details. It's important that students really know what's happening. No confusion. Don't ever want a student to be able to say, you never told me that. You don't ever want that to happen. So what if you decide to skip a detention? You're just going to be a big man on campus and you're not coming into my detention. That's no skin off my nose, kids. I have to be here every day until 4:30 anyway by contract. I'll just find something to do where I don't have to be in my room. Oh, I guess I should tell you, to be fair, that you get a detention for skipping detention. So now you've got 2. And if you continue to play that game, you'll then have 3. And then you'll get 4. And at that, I'm done with you. I'm a band director. I can only count to 4. I don't do that. I will then send you to the office, and you will have 8 office detentions. You're not going to be in my room. 8 office detentions, which are also a half an hour, but you can't do homework and stuff. which I never approved of, but right around the school. And then I would say, to me, that seems like a really poor choice. Oh, and by the way, I'd say, if you don't believe me, you find Mr. Clark, a real tall assistant principal in the cafeteria, you're eating lunch, you ask him. It would be foolish to bluff that. I had gone to Mr. Clark and said, I want to handle all my own discipline. And he, for some reason, immediately smiled. He liked it. He likes it. Monkey likes it. So it was not a bluff. And I think I might have had one student do that, but I can't remember for sure, so I wouldn't say that. But most of my students, and I encouraged it when I was describing detentions in great detail, I would say most bad students don't ever get a detention. Those who do have sort of adopted the policy of one and done because it's boring. I planted that in their mind. It worked really, really well. You see, I learned during these early years something very important. It's not the severity of a threatened consequence that deters poor behavior, it's the certainty of it. You need to be able to tell your students, that will happen. Trust me, that will happen. You can take that to the bank. You will serve that detention or many if you decide to be obstinate. You can trust me on that. And of course, I always did. I always got my man. They served their detentions. I have a funny story about that, but I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to tell you. That's too bad. I think it's in that book, but I'm not sure. So whatever is in your consequence box must happen. It must happen. So think long and hard. I would advise you to check with your administration to make sure they'll back you up. It has to happen. The students need to know that. There should never be threats issued in our classrooms, only promises. How do students know they've gotten the detention? I will come to you afterwards, after class, privately, as all the woodwinds are sitting in their chairs swabbing their instruments. I will come up to you and you and I will just make a private date of when you're going to do your detention. It can't be today because your parents obviously need to know you're going to be here, etc. Management conclusions. That on the front of the page, you see the circle in 2 areas. After I had taught all 5 and practiced all 4 or 5 rules, I would go up and I would draw a circle on the drawing, because now all the rules are written in, the single consequence is written in. I would say, this circle is you. Every day you walk in here, you decide which box you're going to enter. I can't decide that for you. You either enter the rules box or the consequence box. And then I would say several times, notice, there is no third box. There's nowhere else to be in here. You are either in the rules box or you're in the consequence box. And you decide which box. I can't put you, I'd like you all to be in the rules box and stay there all period, but I can't make you do that. That's up to you. The responsibility for behavior has thus been put where? Directly on the shoulders of the students. I have told them, I cannot make you behave. That's your choice. You have a choice. The students start to exercise self-discipline and self-control. And once you get your band, orchestra, choir, music class exercising self-discipline and self-control, you have no management problems. They're gone. They're gone. We explain to our students that we simply, dispassionately, unemotionally, simply observe. Oh, I see Charles has stepped outside the rules box. He's in the consequence box. He's got a detention. And I would write it privately. See him after class. I would say I am like a line judge in tennis. A line judge in tennis simply notices whether the service is inside the box that's painted on the court or outside. The line judge does not immediately holler at a tennis player who serves a fault. You know, how can you serve that ball out of bounds? I thought I was judging a really good tennis team. You got to go back to middle school and learn how to serve. How long do you think I'd end up being a line judge? No, it's totally, I say to them, I will never yell at you. You will not ever see the veins in my neck stand out. I don't even know if I have any veins in my neck because I don't do that. It's just so simple. You're outside the rules box. There's only one place to be. Students need to know that it will not upset us if they get a detention or a consequence. Some students, I think, only misbehave because they know it irritates the teacher, and that's their entertainment for the day. And so I just told my students, I will never, it means nothing to me if you exit the rules box. And I think that line judge in tennis really got through to them. We had a pretty active tennis team at school. Yelling is counterproductive. If you're a yeller and wish you weren't, promise your students you will stop yelling at them. Students hate to be yelled at. They hate it. They are just mini us's. How would you like to be yelled at by the principal in front of all the rest of the faculty? You would hate that. Same thing. Students hate to be yelled at. I know that for sure. So if you're a yeller and don't want to be, promise your students you won't yell at them. And tell them what you'll do if you do yell at them. I will shave my head or whatever. I had a horrible verbal tic. I said, okay, I swear to God, 10,000 times the period. Okay, okay. And I realized that I auto-attacked myself one time and almost threw up. It was so obnoxious. I said, okay, let's get started today. We're going to play the E-flat major scale. Okay, remember the key signature. Okay, here we go. Take a nice breath. Okay, okay. I mean, it was just obnoxious. And so I went to school the very next day. And I said, kids, I listened to a tape I made of yesterday's rehearsal. And I say okay an awful lot, don't I? And they'd go. I mean, they all, I know it was bothering them, but they didn't have the nerve to tell me. I said, so I tell you, I'm going to make you a promise. I am going to stop saying that. And if I ever say it again, we will take 10 minutes off and you can just goof off. And they knew how much I hated to waste even 10 seconds. So that was a real sacrifice. I couldn't say I'd shaved myself bald because... but anyway, so I just said, and they seemed so happy to know I was going to stop saying okay. So I ended up the thing and I said, so starting now, we're going to do it that way. And then I said, okay. What a jerk. And so we immediately took 10 minutes off and just wasted time. And that was the last time. That was the last time. I learned some things the hard way, but I did learn that permanently. So I would say, if you're a yeller and don't want to be, promise them something, and I think it'll stop you. It certainly stopped me from saying, okay. I can say it now, though. Right? Okay, 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 okay. And you can't do it then. Thank you. There you again. See me after class. We're having too much fun here. Gotta get serious. I'm going to urge you very quickly, because I have so much more to tell you. I'm going to urge you to consider wiping the words please and thank you from your vocabulary. You will never hear this anyplace else. You won't read it anyplace else except in my book. We are encouraged in education to say thank you to students. Please, please sit down. I mean, Harry Wong wrote a wonderful book the first week or weeks of school, I can't remember. And I love his stuff, but he's constantly saying, please sit down, thank you. The minute the word please escapes a teacher's lips, they have put themselves in a subservient position. Please is a word you use when you're asking somebody with more power than you to grant you a favor. You do not mean, please sit down. You mean, you need to sit down now. You know how quiet it is in here. The quieter you can say these things with these pregnant pauses. Things said softly register the most loudly on the student brain. Things said softly register the most loudly on the student brain. You know, please is like begging students, but you're giving them all the power. Kids, please be quiet. Please be nice to me. I've worked so hard to become a teacher. I don't want to go home at the end of the day again today and kick my dog. He's a good dog. Please be nice to me. Now, is that an exaggeration? Probably, hopefully. But that's the message. We don't use the word please when we're telling students to do something that we told them you will do in this class. Thank you is just as harmful. Thank you means thank you for being nice to me today. Thank you for sitting down so nicely like I asked you to so prettily. No, thank you has nothing to do, you should not thank students for doing what's on there. You know, I've been paying my taxes to the Internal Revenue Service of the United States for almost 60 years. They have never sent me a thank you letter. Never. And they're not being impolite. It would be ridiculous if I got a thank you letter from them and said, you're thanking me for doing what you told me I have to do. As a matter of fact, if you want to try to remember what all this jibber-jabber I'm telling you is, if you want to remember this whole program, the IRS runs the same program. Their rules box says you will pay your fair share of taxes. The consequence box says go to jail. I've never personally had a problem figuring out which box I was going to put myself in. It's the same program, and there's only 2 boxes. Unless you get a really good lawyer, I suppose there could be several boxes called loopholes. If you try this program and it's working so wonderfully, you are just having the most wonderful time. You will be, you have the first class that's exactly like you drew on that exercise I gave you. You will be so tempted to say, thank you. Don't do it. Wonderful rehearsals are what we have in here. What should you say? Just a simple statement of fact that probably validates what the students are thinking anyway. This has been a terrific rehearsal. See you tomorrow. But don't thank them for doing what you said they're going to do. We are going to have wonderful rehearsals. We're not going to waste time, and we're going to get a really great distance on our journey together. Everything I've been telling you throughout all these minutes will work really well for about 6 weeks. I don't know about the great Northwest here, but I think school years are a lot longer than 6 weeks. They're about 36 in Ohio, where I'm from. Something else has to take over, unless you want to become a police person. If you wanted to become a police person, I think you would have gone to the police academy. You went to the School of Music because you wanted to become a music teacher. The thing that has to take over the discipline in the room is music. And this is a very hopeful way to end this whole thing. Once you get the management, then you can start to make music. And there will be instant improvement in your class. The kids will go home, because they're having very efficient rehearsals, the kids will go home and they'll tell their parents, you should hear us this year. We're starting to sound really good, because you have the musical skills to do that. And nobody's wasting a single minute. It will be almost instantaneously. There will be tremendous, tremendous strides made. So I want to introduce you to, I'm going to have to skip some stuff, but in your handout there are, on page 2, foundational principles. I mentioned this yesterday briefly in a session on, what was yesterday? Teacher Ribbon. Foundational principles, number 1 and 2, I think they are so profoundly important for teaching anything. We must give our students the luxury of being able to concentrate on only one thing at a time. And number 2, we must give them the time to master that one thing before we move them on to the next thing. From that philosophy that I developed, I unknowingly developed a 2-part rehearsal format, and that's what I want to leave you with today. The 2 parts of the rehearsal were the class. General music, I taught general music class, it worked the same way. The first part of every rehearsal is unison teaching, group teaching of various specific musical skills. Begins all classes. Students are all participating, everybody. In a band situation, when we're working on melody, all the percussionists are playing mallets. In some situations, they might not like playing mallets. I do have another mic. Anyway, I'm going to continue talking. Can you hear me well out there? Yeah. You're all right. So, we spend time teaching students various musical skills. We teach rhythms as units of study, just like a math teacher teaches units of study. They teach the adding of fractions for a week, and then there's a quiz on it. Then they teach the division of fractions. They don't teach them together. We need to teach individual musical skills. So we teach rhythms, we teach scales, articulations, styles, intonation, diction, bowing, vowel systems. They're concentrated one at a time and are mastered before the students are ever asked to execute them in a piece of music. This is the important thing. This is going to sound a little strange, but I think the most successful music teachers do not teach music. What did he say? Maybe we need that microphone back or something. What did he say? He said the most successful music teachers do not teach music. They teach specific musical skills, which the students then get to use in the musical literature for the purpose of aesthetic pleasure. What do I mean by that? Students need to be taught. I'm going to tell you a profoundly impressive story from my experience. I taught a unit this one year, well, every year, but this one year I taught a unit on legato phrasing. Every student in my class worked in studios. Found agents in the method book for legato. I got them playing beautiful, rhythmic legato. They all knew how to say the word, they knew how to spell it, they knew what the composer used, they knew that value, they knew legato. They had mastered it. They played it beautifully. Every year at the end of the year, after our last concert, it was usually like 2 weeks of school left, kids would walk in and I would have every tune in the folder, 45 or 50 tunes, listed on the chalkboard. I had to get to school really early that day. And the students, and I told them, the last day of the school year is the last time this band, this wonderful little musical society we have grown this year, will never, ever exist again. All the 8th graders are going to the high school. 6th graders are moving up to 7th, 7th moving up to 8th, we'll have kids move in. This ensemble will never exist again. So I want you all to vote for the last tune you want this band to ever play. It will never exist again. I did this every year. Actually, I had to put down, they had to list 5 things to circle the one they wanted to do the last one. So we spent the last part of the year, and they were to tell me, I'd like to conduct that tune. I taught all my kids to conduct. Woodward's turn to conduct the brass as the brass play the scale. Bass would conduct the woodwinds. I mean, they need to know what I'm doing up there. The best way to know what I'm doing is for them to be able to do it, right? So that year in the folder, we had Bill Pullman's phenomenal arrangement of music from the first Rocky movie. I had great brass players. I had a wonderful drummer. I had a jazz electric guitar player who's still playing around Cleveland. I see his name. He's like 55 now. He was in my 8th grade band. And that year I knew I'm not going to have to even count the votes. I know what the last tune is that these kids are going to want to play. I was wrong. It was not Rocky. Rocky was the next to last one, and they just played the heck out of it. The last tune this band wanted to play. Now remember, we have really perfected legato phrasing, expressive phrasing. The last tune that band wanted to play was Mozart's Ave Vericorpus. Boy, did I learn something that day. That would not have happened, my friends, if it were not for this 2-part rehearsal format. Why was that so? Why did they love that so much? They loved it so much because as I told him when I handed that tune out, this beautiful piece of music demands you bring your A game in legato to this, and you are doing legato so beautifully. So from the first sounds, it was gorgeous. It was absolutely gorgeous. It's not technically difficult, not a difficult rhythm in it. And so from day one, it sounded. That would not have happened, and I'm not taking credit for this. It's the two-part rehearsal format that gets the credit. I had taught them all how to play legato. And then I handed out a beautiful piece of music at the beginning. My point with the two-part rehearsal is that we, and I said it before, we don't really teach music. We teach musical skills as units of study. And when that unit of study has been mastered, then we hand out a piece of music and say, now, would you like to hear what a great composer has done with legato? Students that very first day, I remember, walked out and passed me and said, I love that new piece. The thing that brought my mind to that was I just saw recently on a band website, some middle school director saying, my kids hate playing slow and expressive. Well, I know exactly why. You cannot teach a musical skill through music literature. What you do is you butcher the piece of music. You cannot teach compound 6/8 by handing out a 6/8 march. Because you're going to teach the second clarinets how their rhythm goes in that measure, then the first clarinets, while all the other kids are sitting doing nothing. One of the great benefits, and this is a management session, right? One of the great benefits of this whole thing is that in the two-part lesson format, everybody is working the first part of every class. Everybody, 100% of the students participate in learning legato, in learning compound meter. My students, before I handed out, after I learned what I was doing, I learned the hard way. I just made a mess of a 6/8 march, and I thought, okay, now the kids have understood the 6/8. All they learned was their part of that march. They couldn't begin to sight read march. So the next day, the next year, I did a unit of study, a long, protracted unit of study, only 2 or 3 minutes every day, every single day. It ended up with rhythmic dictation. We're talking 7th and 8th graders. Rhythmic dictation. I said, okay, this is 6/8 time, 4 measures. I will say, I will do it, clap it 4 times, and I'll go. Here we go. Now, 4 times, I just had it written down so I knew what I did. And then I handed out the piece, and they sight read it. There were mistakes, but we didn't get bogged down. And I could use my 4 magic words with them. My 4 magic words. Now this is extra. I'm not going to charge extra for this. This is a bonus for you all being here and being so quiet. 4 magic words. If you have done a great job with this two-part rehearsal format, after, in every rehearsal, you cross the bridge. There's a bridge down there at the bottom, and you go to the literature part. Now is where you say, okay, we really mastered this skill. Now let's make music using these skills that you can already do. I never handed out a piece of music that had a skill that I had not taught and they had not mastered. And remember, foundational principles, give the students a luxury of concentrating on one thing at a time, and then having them master it, taking the time. We are in too big a hurry in this society. Take the time it takes. When they have mastered it, then you hand out the piece of music. So anyway, they instantly liked the piece. That's why the very favorite song, the one they wrote is Hummingbird Purpose, because from day one, it was beautiful. Step away from the notes and I forget what I was doing. With Ryan to the rescue. Hello. I'm glad you all came back. Thank you.
Just doing my job.
Okay. Well done. Now that I'm back where my notes are, I can see what I should be saying. Oh, this is a management session. Oh, that's so nice to have that back. This is a management session. this two-part rehearsal format basically eliminates management problems. In the first part, every student is working. They're doing what they wanted to do. They signed up for your class to make music. They are making sounds. Everybody is getting a unit of study on syncopation, 6/8 time, legato phrasing, chromaticism, all these kinds of things. And I taught so many things. I'll give you an example. Let me tell you this. Students are very proud to be in a well-managed class. They are so proud. And they love learning things besides the second clarinet part to all the concert tunes. They want to learn music. They want us to speak music. I said, I think yesterday, they want to know the word espressivo. They want to say it right. They want to say it and then understand it. They really want to learn. My students, I taught in a suburb where there's a conservatory of music, Baldwin Wallace University, where I taught part-time in the music education department. So my students were accustomed to having people all the time observing them. And every year, the music education professors from Oberlin College, I'm sure you've all heard of Oberlin, would come to my school. They'd all board a bus and they'd come to watch a band rehearsal. Oberlin's about a 50-minute drive from where I taught. Well, this one day, now I never told my students I was being observed. I mean, I think that it seems so ridiculous. I'm being observed tomorrow, behave. They behaved every day. I mean, so they just, so my kids walked in and they saw, ringing the whole back of the room was 21 or 22 students from the Introduction to Music Education course at Oberlin. They were freshmen, and 4 professors. Well, they didn't think anything of it, so they just came in and started warming up. And I didn't think anything of it either. Maybe I should have, but I didn't. So it was just another rehearsal to us. So they're all warming up, and I stepped up on the podium, and there was, of course, instant silence. Except for the Oberlin students. They didn't know that was going to happen, and they were back there talking among themselves and talking kind of loudly so they could be heard over the warming up. The moral, why I'm telling this story is I want you to know how proud the students are to be. So my students gave them one of these. And they slowly turned around, and about half of them were going. Memorable day. That same rehearsal, I want to tell you, I'm trying to tell you that our students, I know that our students want to learn these things. These units of study that happen in the first part of the rehearsal are so important. Not only do they make it possible for you to make real music in the second half, but they're really learning. What I did every day was ear training. It's something I think we all need to do more of. You know, there are so many people who have graduated, gone through our band, orchestra, choir programs, and they no longer make any music. The tenor sax is still in the closet. Why don't you ever pick that up and play it? And they'll say, I don't have any music. They think that music has to be black dots on a white piece of paper. They were not taught that you can make your own music. You don't need sheet music to make music. And so I taught my band, the whole band, to do what I called ear training. Now, I am a very old person, so on the rehearsal agenda it said E.T. That's because it was about the time of the movie Extraterrestrial. So every day we did E.T., ear training. So I would just step to the piano. I had a nice piano in my room, and I would play. I would say concert B flat, and I would play. Da da do 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 do. They'd play it back. I go do 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 dum, and they would play that back. Now, by the way, this Oberlin visit was like in the spring of the year, and we had done this every day, so they could do some. We didn't start out that way. You know how I started it out? Check it my watch here. I got time. Just rhythm. I say, okay, I'm going to play. Everything I play is going to be in a concert F. Just my turn, your turn. I play on the piano. Do 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 do. They play it back. It's always important to start a new learning where everybody does it well. They think, oh, good, I like this. And then maybe the second or third day, I'd say, now listen. Do 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 do. Was it perfect? No. I say again, listen more carefully. Then it would be. So this is in B flat, I was starting on F. So I was going sol, then fa, then I go do, 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 do. Every day. So when the Oberlin students were there in March or April, I can't remember, I did things like this. I had not planned it, but we just did it every day. I went da 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 do dum. I can't sing with this cold. Da 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 do 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 do. They played it perfectly. I said, Paul, what's that mode? He said, Lydian. I said, da da do 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 da dum. Michelle, what's that mode? They played it. Michelle, what's that mode? Mixolydian. We played the Dorian. By now, I'm looking at the Oberlin students and I'm seeing this. I mean, they are amazed. They told their professors they thought I was a genius. Listen, I am so far from being a genius. I'm just a really organized person who figured out this two-part lesson format. Our students want to know these things, and you have time. Now you're going to be thinking, I don't have time to do all those mini lessons. Yes, you do, because the music, in the second part of the rehearsal, the music just flies. And you could use my 4 magic words, which I promised, and it just came floating back to my senile mind here, so I'm going to tell you. In the second part of the rehearsal, when you're doing the literature, if you have done a great job in the first part, where if you have really taught the separate skills that they need to make music, you can stop them and you can make a correction using as few as 4 words, even fewer. You can say, let's say there's a rhythm problem, you can say, second clarinets, measure 27. Look at the rhythm. 4 words, look at the rhythm. And you'll see, and they'll go, sorry. You can say, if they're too loud, you can just stop and say, look at the dynamics. 4 words. That is so much more important than saying you're too loud. When you say you're too loud, are you getting any thinking going on in the class? No, you did the thinking. All they have to do is react. That's not education. But when you say, look at the dynamics, they have to look at it and they have to say to themselves, ooh, we're too loud. And when they say to themselves, ooh, we're too loud, they'll remember it far better than if you tell them. We tell our students too much. We need to challenge them to think. They love to think. This is called music education. This is not music performance class. This is music education. I got to watch the wonderful Marvin from Wisconsin. His name is written in here somewhere. Anyway, I'll think of it on the plane. Wonderful, well-known orchestra conductor. It's going to bother me, Marvin. Anyway, he was conducting the all-state orchestra in the community that I live in, not the one I taught in, the one I live in. And so I stopped in after school one day just to watch a master at work. And the orchestra sounded phenomenal, but I didn't know the literature, I didn't know any students. And so at one time he said, okay, everybody get your pencils. And he held up his pencil and he waited until everybody got a pencil. He says, okay, measure 182, I want you to write in mezzo piano. Well, I look at the students and there's all kinds of confusion. The kids are looking at each other. So finally, one brave kid raises his hand and says, sir, it already says mezzo piano there. And Marvin says, it does? What a great way to get the kids thinking. I know that kids, they still remember that. They're saying to themselves, oh yeah, the stuff underneath the notes is important too. So much more impressive than you're too loud. So our students really, really, really want to know so many things. I have 2 minutes, and I might make it. I'm usually too late because I take all these side trips. Summary, the 2-part rehearsal format. Students do a great deal more singing and playing because 100% are participating in the first part of every group part of the lesson, and there are no long stops while you're experiencing the literature, none. You can make corrections, by the way, by saying no words. My students knew that if I stopped them and I just stood up there and went 27 again, they knew that I was going to correct or I was going to conduct the correction. If they were too loud, it would be. You know, we all have to get our students to watch us better. If they had been imprecise, I would conduct like, I would go, no, and then I would go. They're thinking, they're thinking. They're going to learn so much more. So there's far less boredom in the whole class. Everybody's working the first half, everybody's working the second half. They have few opportunities and little desire for off-task behaviors. They don't want to misbehave. Did you ever think of misbehaving when you were in an organization making beautiful music? The furthest thing from your mind. Music grabs them. You know, there's not a person in this audience, I don't think, who's here because of some trip your high school group took. Trips are wonderful. You are all here, why? Because you got hooked on music. And that's what we need to retain our students, which is a very important problem. We need to get them hooked on music. I think this two-part lesson format does that. I had 100% sign-ups in my band program, 100% for many, many years. No student ever dropped, and they didn't have to participate in music after 6th grade. It wasn't me, it wasn't my magnificent, wonderful personality. It was music that brought them back. They just loved making music. And this two-part rehearsal format and this excellent management program makes that possible. So after I retired, as I said, you had time to think. I came up with these couple of things. First of all, I had found a very simple classroom management plan that was simple to teach, simple to learn, and simple to monitor. And then I conducted classes in which students were essentially making music every day, all year, from beginning to end. There was no time, there was no reason, and no desire to do anything else. Classes structured in this fashion changed from being band rehearsals, orchestra rehearsals, and choir rehearsals. They literally become music classes in the largest sense of that wonderful word. It's a wonderful way to spend your professional life. I thank you for your very, very kind attention. I've had a great time here in the Northwest. Thank you so much.
Please join me once again in thanking David Newell for being here this morning.
Thank you so much. Have a